Hello, everybody. Welcome to our May Well and Wise lecture. Please make sure that as you're walking in, you're checking in. We would really appreciate that. But we're going to get started with an opening prayer by Maya Blomquist. And then after that, I will introduce Dr. Brian Hill.
Our Father in heaven, we're so very grateful that we have the opportunity to meet together today to hear from Brother Hill. We ask that during this time that our minds can be enlightened and that we can be able to pay attention to the promptings of the Spirit to know what things we can apply to our own lives. We're grateful for the opportunity that we have to make social connections and learn how we can improve them and improve the relationships in our lives. We're grateful for thee and for all of our many blessings. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Maya. Okay, Dr. Brian Hill is a professor for experience design and management in the Marriott School of Business. He is a former department chair and graduate coordinator and has been at BYU for 25 years. He earned his PhD from Clemson University and taught at the University of Nebraska for 10 years before coming to BYU. Brian teaches his favorite class ever, Creating a Good Life Through Experience Design, to about 800 students each semester. His research is focused on the linkage between positive psychology and experience design, particularly connection through shared experience. On the side, Brian teaches whitewater rafting, canyoneering, Dutch oven cooking, and wilderness medicine. He has been on the search and rescue team in Utah County for 15 years. Brian is married to Karen Dalton Hill, and they have 4 adult children and 2 granddaughters. Now I'll turn the time over to Dr. Brian Hill for his presentation.
All right, thanks everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to be here with you. I feel a little out of place. I've come to a few Well and Wise lectures over time, and they were always taught by somebody in exercise science or nutrition. So I know that this is a little different to get somebody from the business school who's going to talk to you about emotional and social well-being, sorry. Okay, there we are. But that's what we're going to do. And I come from the background of being an applied social scientist. That's really my training. And today I'm very focused on positive psychology and how positive psychology, it's kind of my class, Creating a Good Life, is really all about the science of happiness and how it is that you can actually create a good life for yourself. So today we're going to talk about emotional and social well-being. I actually took a couple slides off of here that now I'm sorry that I did, but I'm going to just talk for just a minute about why it is that having positive emotions and social connections matter to our overall well-being and health. This is something that many of you would probably know, that we have a parasympathetic nervous system that's a part of our overall nervous system. It includes a thing called the vagal nerve, which goes from a part of our brain and then reaches into other parts of our body and has an impact in interesting ways. So when our vagal nerve is triggered, it causes our heart rate to slow down, causes our respiratory rate to slow down. It also reduces our blood pressure. It takes up cortisol in our blood. And if you know, cortisol is the hormone of stress, and it causes all kinds of damage to our organs when it's in our blood system for too long of a period of time. So we have cortisol relief in a sense. It also reduces inflammation. One of the ways we can know if our vagal system is working well is if we have the ability to calm down quickly. So when we talk about having a well-toned vagal nerve and vagal parasympathetic system, it kind of means that we have practiced enough of relaxing that we can relax quickly after we've been agitated or kind of amped up. So the things that we're going to talk about today, positive emotion and social connection, have been shown to increase the functions of our parasympathetic nervous system, to trigger our vagal nerve. And we're going to actually practice some of that today, and you will go away healthier than you did when you came. Okay? I don't know how much or how measurable that will be, but that's what we're going to do. And these are all very applied sorts of things. Interesting, in the world of positive psychology, the study of happiness, almost all of the focus is on very applied, very possible to do, I guess, easy, I guess we might even say, behaviors that can actually change our well-being. So I'm going to introduce you to a guy named Martin Seligman. He's the founder of positive psychology. In 1990, he became the president of the American Psychological Association. He met with the thousands of psychologists in the United States and said, you know what, we've been doing psychology focused on deficits for 100 years. Maybe we ought to focus on the positive side of psychology and see if we can make some people happier instead of just some people less sick. And so this was kind of a move. There had been maybe a few articles that had been published and a little bit of research that had been done up to this point on positive psychology and happiness. And there are thousands of articles and efforts that have been done since. So in the last 20 to 30 years, a great focus on happiness in the world of psychology. This is one of those things that I just want to kind of suggest to you that psychologists have kind of figured out where our happiness comes from. And this may sit kind of funny with you, but let me explain it quickly. So our enduring level of happiness comes about 50% from a set range. This is kind of interesting, and you may feel glum over that. It's sort of like your genetics. We all have a set point, almost like a thermostat of happiness. And you could say, well, that means I don't have control over that part of my happiness. And that's sort of right. But there's sort of good news and bad news. And the reason that we know this is because we can see when people have events in their lives that might make them very, very much happier for a short period of time. So people win the lottery or get married, their happiness just takes off. You know, they have a huge boost in mood. Problem is that about a year later, it's returned to where they were before. And so we have these events that maybe we get a raise or a promotion, or our kid wins a championship, whatever it is that sort of could boost our mood and make us happier. That's gonna go up, but over a period of time, and usually it's more like a 6 to 9 months, it drops back down. So that's sort of like, dang, you know, even these really good things that happen to me don't make me happier forever. But on the flip side of that, when bad things happen to us, like really bad things, like divorce or losing a job or losing somebody very close to us who dies, same thing happens. We see a drop in our happiness. And that may last a while, months, but within a year, most people are back to that level of happiness they were before. Doesn't mean they may not continue to grieve or that they may not feel the loss, but their level of happiness, as we measure it, is kind of returned to that set point. So that means about 50% of our happiness is sort of set. We kind of have that, and some are a little higher than others, but that's kind of where we begin. What we tend to believe when we talk to people and even listen to people talk is that our happiness really comes from our circumstances. By this, it's sort of like things like where you live, what job you have, how much money you're making, if I could only be prettier, if I could only be thinner, if I lived in Florida, if I lived by the beach, then somehow I would be happier. You know, advertising has made billions and billions of dollars for products because we have bought into this idea that our happiness really comes from our circumstances. It's interesting, even President Nelson has said our happiness does not come from our circumstances. There are a few things that seem to matter. Religion is one of those. We actually are happier if we're religious, and being married is a bump in happiness. This is still only 10% of the variance of our happiness as humanity goes. Things like our appearance, our weight, and even money, once we get beyond sort of a poverty threshold, making more of that, where our jobs really have less influence on our happiness than we kind of might think that they will. This leaves 40% of our happiness coming from behaviors that we choose to do. We can have long-term impact. So we can impact through our own voluntary behavior of 40% of our happiness. So If you thought that was going to be 100%, well, maybe you would be disappointed. This is still, I think, the part about the circumstances, maybe these are things you've told yourself, sort of, oh, if I only, then I would be happier. Well, the news is that's not really true, okay? But that's not what I want to focus on, but it's a little bit of a, oh, let's see here. Guess I need to push my own buttons. Well, here we go. Okay. So, sorry, these are meant to be introductory and I'm kind of taking too long on this, but so Seligman first came out with trying to understand happiness, and there was this theory of authentic happiness. About 10 years later, he said, you know, we've been too narrow. We've only looked at positive emotion. What we really need to look at is well-being. And so he developed this theory of well-being and said that there are 5 major pillars or elements to our well-being. The first of this is positive emotion. So feeling happy, feeling good, receiving or feeling positive emotions really matters to us, and that is still a part of this theory of well-being. And engagement refers to those experiences that involve us very deeply. If you've ever heard of flow from a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, so his concepts about being deeply immersed in activities and having those kinds of opportunities that use our skills and challenge us to really be able to perform. That's a part of well-being as well. Positive relationships, we're going to talk about more today, having meaning in our life and feeling that we've contributed in some way through accomplishment. These are the pillars of positive psychology and the theory of well-being. So I want to talk about kind of positive emotion today and our relationships. So talking a little bit about ways that we can improve our the positive emotions that we feel, as well as the social relationships, and how we can, in a very practical way, can build on these. So a woman named Barbara Fredrickson has written a few books. She started off studying positive emotions. That was kind of her work. She's at the University of North Carolina. She wrote a book called Positivity and identified these 10 kinds of emotions. Other people have identified other lists of emotions. Brene Brown has 87 emotions in her book, Atlas of the Heart. And I've seen some lists of 300 different emotions. These are pretty good ones: love, joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, and awe. What's interesting is that Barbara Fredrickson, as she started to dive deeper in understanding these emotions that we feel that build us up, she started to find that there was sort of this super emotion, an emotion that was more important than all the rest. Can you guess which one it is? Gratitude is a very important one. We're going to talk about that later. Love. Somebody said love. I heard it. Love seems to be that kind of an emotion that makes every other emotion greater. It's probably, she calls it the super emotion. So we're going to talk about that. But she's studied love and now has a book called Love 2.0. And one of the things that she suggested is trying to understand. So she's done this research with people hooked up to wires and blood draws and looking at oxytocin and other neurological sorts of measures of love to find out what happens when people feel love. And we talk about love as sort of this commitment. It's sort of a long-term relationship that we might have with someone. She says, think about this a little differently. Think about this in the moment that you feel a connection to someone else. So I want you to feel it right now. Okay, I told you you'll be healthier for doing this. So you're gonna have to find somebody who you can actually look at. They have to be pretty close to you. So if you have to move, that's gonna be helpful. So I imagine that there's some of you are here with people you know, that's fine. These moments of love can happen between people who have never met. It can happen between people who know each other for 40 years. So I want you to pick out somebody, look at them right now so you know who you're going to turn towards. You got to have a person. Does everybody have, you guys who are like all alone, this is going to spoil it for you. You guys are good? How about you? Yeah. Can you guys do it? Yeah. I'm counting on you. All right. So what you need to do is turn and it's easy to get ahead of yourself. So stay with me. turn towards a person, look them in the eye. That's it. Okay? Just look at each other. We getting there? All right, you've started. Now I want you to let an authentic smile sneak across your face. For most of you, it's already happened. I can see it. Okay? Now you smiled at the other person. Now I want you to actually touch them. So this is an important part of it. So you got to shake hands. Needs to be appropriate. All right. Now you can smile again at them. Now I want them to hear your voice. And hopefully just you have this feeling inside that you want something good for this person. You'll be glad if good things happen to them. Okay, so wish them well. All right. Very good. So now you have experienced positivity resonance today. So even if you came with a spouse, you know, we think about that I think about this as it relates to like our long-term relationships. You know, we see each other all the time, but we don't do this all the time. We don't just smile at each other and touch each other and say, I hope that you are good. You know, we could do it more, because I hope that you felt it. Maybe not everyone here did, but I'll bet most of you felt something really good when you connected with this person. You know, I was coming in the doors, the other end of the Wilk, coming over here today, and you know, there's this sort of like figuring out who's going to open the door, because there was somebody coming my way and I was going the other way, and it's like, who's going to go which way? And we just smiled at each other. Now, I won't even remember that person, but I felt something to just smile at each other. So we're going to talk about this a little bit, and so you can understand why this works so well, and my effort to encourage you to do this a lot more. When I teach this to students, I think that it's a little bit harder because they're looking here, right? So often. And you're probably a little less likely to be driven by looking at your phones every sort of encumbered minute. But we still can get caught up in that, and we can still probably do this more. All right. So let me just tell you a little bit about her findings. So in Love 2.0, Barbara Fredrickson says that love is the supreme emotion. In the science of emotions, positive emotions are subtle, brief, but potentially powerful forces for growth. So when you felt this positivity resonance with somebody else who's here, your vagal nerve was triggered. You may have even had oxytocin released into your system. There may have even been a little bit of dopamine. That was this reward hormone as well. So even though it doesn't last very long, it can be quite powerful on you. This is another really interesting thing about what happens when you feel this. Your outlook expands, you become more flexible. So that if this were ongoing and you were being needed, you needed to think broadly about something that you were dealing with. Maybe this is why we love to sort of work with other people who we like. And that makes a huge difference in our workplace, because we actually see more possibilities when we're having positivity resonance in our work. So we become more flexible, we become more attuned to other people, we become more creative and even wise. So there's this sort of broadening, but there's also this building. This is kind of the theory that Fredrickson works from, is called the broaden and build. So we broaden our perspectives. We also build by becoming more resourceful. We gain more knowledge, we're more resilient, we're more socially integrated and healthier, the more of this positivity resonance that we have. All right. So this is the definition, the micro moment of warmth and connection that you share with another living being. Our supreme emotion, it's our supreme emotion because any of the other positive emotions can be transformed into an instance of love when felt in connection with another person. We become most fully alive and feel most human when we experience this positivity resonance. We become sincerely invested in another person's well-being simply for her or his or her own sake. Okay. So positivity resonance is the term she uses instead of love, because it's this micro moment. It's sharing one or more positive emotions between you and another. And this is when it starts to get really kind of scientifically interesting. There's a synchrony between another person's biochemistry and their behavior, and a reflected motive to invest in each other's well-being that brings about mutual care. So this is kind of a weird thing that I think you kind of have to pay attention to notice. So it's really important to know that before you can have these moments, these micro moments of love, more of this positivity resonance, there has to be some sort of preconditions. So the first one is that you have to feel safe. So if you're in a situation where you don't feel safe, in a work setting or a physical space outside, then this isn't likely to happen. Or maybe even an emotionally charged setting that you're in, or relationship, then you may not get to feel this. And the connection happens through eye contact, through touch and voice, and mirrored body postures and gestures like smiling. So now let me tell you about sort of kind of what I think is maybe really cool. So when Barbara Fredrickson had her research participants hooked up to wires and blood tubes, this is what she started to find, is that when people went through this little process that we just practiced, that there began to be these synchronicities. They started to show up in the release of hormones, in behavioral sorts of ways, but even in brain function. So what happens is you're smiling at each other, you're touching each other's hands, you're hearing each other's voices. What happens is your brain begins to synchronize. The same parts of our brain are actually being triggered, and that they are functioning same places in the brain, and the same sort of electrical waves are happening. Same thing has happened with oxytocin. So oxytocin actually is released in sort of these waves. And what she's found is that when people are feeling love, that those waves synchronize with each other. It's pretty cool, right? And then, of course, we have the behavioral things, which you just notice. You notice it's pretty hard to smile at someone who was watching you without smiling back. That just happens so naturally. And if you've ever noticed, if I'm in the elevator and I start talking to somebody, and if I'm using my hands, then they're probably going to start using their hands. You ever noticed if you wave at someone, they wave back? There's sort of this synchronicity of even our behaviors and the ways that we physically move our bodies when we're kind of having that click connection with somebody. I've already talked about the vagus nerve. We don't need to go over that. All right. So I'd like you to think about when this has happened to you. And I would love for you to just share with this person that you already made a connection with a time recently when you can feel like I didn't know somebody, or maybe this was somebody that I was reconnecting with, and I just felt that good feeling of connection with someone. And under what circumstances did you kind of feel this positivity resonance happen to you? We'll just let you share for like less than a minute, if you'll think about the time this happened. All right, thanks for sharing with each other. So when you come to a session like this and you think, okay, I'm going to learn about social connections and social well-being, probably have different expectations than somebody saying, oh, smile at people more, right? But it's really interesting because we have somebody here on campus who studied loneliness and the terrible impacts of that on people's well-being, how it's like as bad as smoking and that kind of thing. Julia Holt-Lunstead is just famous all over our country and over the world from her research on loneliness. I went to talk to her about maybe possibly trying to get some funding to do a joint project, and she was pretty excited. She said, I get called all the time by people saying, okay, we know that this loneliness is so bad, but how do we get people to connect? And she says, I don't really have that many answers. But this is one of those most simple of all answers, is just to have more moments of positivity resonance in our lives. To me, this means when you walk back to your office, just look for somebody who you can look in the eye and smile at. You'll feel something. They'll feel something. The next time you're in an elevator, actually say hello to somebody who you don't know in there instead of looking at your phone. And how could you do this in relationships that already exist with your kids or with your spouses or with your friends? I think you can. So when I go home, I don't know what my wife thinks of this stuff, actually. I never asked her, but I try to go to her and to touch her and to smile at her and to make sure that I get just that little moment of positivity resonance. So I think that greeting, even when we kind of meet somebody who we have a long relationship with, can give us that burst of love. So that's all I'm suggesting, is that just add a bunch more of these to your day and it will improve your life. It will improve your social well-being. Okay. So the next topic I want to talk about is ways. Somebody mentioned already the most powerful emotion. And I want to say that in many ways it really is. At least it is the most well-tested and well-proven way to improve your happiness in about 30 seconds. And that is expressing gratitude. So we're going to do something. I actually have a video, but I don't think we'll take time to show it. Besides, there is a swear word in it, so I don't want to. I was felt kind of funny about including that. But we're going to talk it. We're going to do this. So this is one of those interventions that the positive psychologists have worked over and over, and they've kind of figured out that this powerful idea just works over and over again in every study. What they ask people to do is to take a paper, or I guess they can use a laptop, and to write about at least a 1-page, maybe a 200-word letter of gratitude to somebody who they may not have thanked adequately enough for their influence on their lives in the past. So it can't be just like, thank you so much for all you've done for me. That's not enough, right? You have to write details, specific things they've done. So you write that letter, and then you take it to that person. You say, I have something I need to say to you, and I'm going to read it to you. And then you read the letter. You can guess what happens. People cry, right? And their moods are boosted. And that boosting of the mood lasts for months. They come back later, and that person's level of happiness has stepped up for a long period of time. Now, that's kind of more extreme, but I think we maybe not get that much of a boost for you for months. I think we can make you feel better than when you walked in this door right now. This is how we're going to do it. So we talk about the attitude of gratitude. This is broadly accepted across all traditions and all parts of our world. So this is the video we're skipping. But we're going to express gratitude. So I want you to think of somebody right now who you could express gratitude to, even in just a few sentences. Okay? So if you get your phone out, okay, hopefully you have one. And I want you to write 3 sentences that express some detail of the gratitude you feel towards this person that just came to your mind. Just type it in to your texts, or maybe email, whatever works easiest for you. I'm going to give you time to do this. you can start to wrap up whatever you've put together and push the send button. So when I do this in class, there are hundreds of mothers, maybe a few other people too, but there are hundreds of mothers who are having a small boost in their happiness. And the people who get these messages, they're happier. But what's really interesting, that the people who get the biggest bump in happiness are the ones who send the message. And I hope you feel it. It feels a little bit like the spirit feels. It just feels good to express gratitude to other people. And I don't know how we can, this isn't quite as easy to do every day. I think you can develop an attitude of gratitude. You can look for opportunities. But I think the thing to remember, it's not just the feeling of gratitude, it's the expression. It's saying it when it really matters. It's the thing that seems to have the impact on us. So if you're feeling kind of gloomy, just remember this. This is such an easy thing to do, is to just think of somebody when you're feeling gloomy who I could say thank you to, and it will have an impact on how you feel, at least for the rest of that day, maybe the next day, maybe longer than that. There's another emotion that I have been focused on, and I want to tell you about, because I think this is another one of those things that you can do multiple times a day to increase your happiness and well-being. So it comes from a book called Awe by a guy named Dr. Keltner. He's at the University of California at Berkeley. He's a neuroscientist who's been doing research and studies on awe for several decades. And the definition of awe is the emotion we experience when we encounter vast mysteries that transcend our current understanding of the world. So things that are bigger than us. So I want to tell you a little bit about just a brief summary of this book and how it is that I think you can get a little more awe in your life and why I think it's so important. So in the research on awe, these are some of the findings that are kind of interesting. The bottom one here, I've already talked about triggering the vagal nerve, how this reduces our stress. It reduces inflammation. It raises our immunity. So when we feel awe, our vagal nervous system is triggered and all of these things are happening for us. So it sort of suggests, wow, if you could feel awe multiple times a day, I could have that happen multiple times a day. Same time, we're reaching out, shaking hands, smiling at people. We're also wanting to say, to find a way to see some awe. But this is really a part that's really interesting to me, is that it kind of reduces our view of ourself. In a sense, I think it makes us more humble when we feel awe. So this is how they kind of understand this. They took kids who were in a natural setting, who could see a beauty in nature, and they had them sort of in a place where they would feel some awe. Their sense was, here you're going to have awe in this natural setting. Another one was in a building, in a city, and they asked them to draw a picture of themselves. The kids who were drawing a picture of themselves in nature, they drew the beautiful landscape, the mountains, the trees, and then they drew a small picture of themselves. And then the kids who were in the city drew a big picture of themselves and a little bit of background behind that. So this sort of was a clue that something's going on here. And then further studies sort of validated that idea that we become less important to ourselves when we experience awe, which I think is probably important, especially in this day. So I want to teach you about the 8 sources of awe, because I think this is one of the really important pieces, is that awe can come from different things. Most people talk about awe and they talk about nature. So for me, when I can see here on campus, we have a beautiful campus. If I look up on the Y Mountain or over towards Timpanogos, when there's snow on these mountains, or color in the leaves, or just green, I just kind of go, oh, wow. When I come back to campus, when I've been away a little while, even over the weekend and come back, it's like, wow, this is a beautiful place. So nature is common, but these other ones are probably, we don't think of nearly as much. So I want to talk about them just briefly. So moral beauty is one of the sources of awe. This is whenever we see anyone else do something good. When we witness goodness, we can go, oh, wow. You see somebody do something kind, or you learn about some generous thing that someone did. You feel awe. Collective effervescence refers to, it's a word used by Emil Durkheim, a sociologist from over 100 years ago, who said, kind of defined this. This is the idea of the connection that you feel in a unified group, like a team that just won a championship, or a group of workers who completed a difficult task and feel exhilarated in their success. Or I think of a group of missionaries who just love to be together. You know, some of our families fit there, maybe. I don't know, but other groups of people that could be temporary or long-term, they give us that sense of unity. I think this is probably a description of Zion. Collective effervescence and awe in our relationships. Nature, we've talked about. Music can cause us to feel awe. Visual design and art. The oldest probably source of awe is spirituality and religion, and we understand that. We feel this sense of awe from God and from the Spirit, and the understandings that we have of our religious world. Life and death. When you hold a new life, you hold something that has just been born. It's a great sense of awe. And even when people die, or we're around death, even though that may make us unhappy for a time or be felt negatively, there's still a great deal of awe about death, I think. And then finally, Keltner talks about personal epiphanies, those moments when we realize that something for the first time or more deeply than any other time. So this idea of a personal epiphany, I think of a conversion is really a personal awe. When we sense a witness or a testimony of something. So these are the sources of awe, different ways that we might feel awe. This is when I kind of got the most excited about this work on awe. So Keltner had picked up the studies of not just sources of awe, but sort of how do you measure it? How do you know when awe has happened? And so some of the findings from these studies suggest these things. When people feel awe, they cry. Okay? So when you feel love, I think that has to fit in that collective effervescence. You might cry. You might feel chills when you experience awe. And what's kind of interesting is that people all over the world make the same sound. They say, whoa, or wow. It's interesting because when I first read this book, I was teaching students in Austria, and I kind of took that to them and said, so they were from, I think, 15 different countries, maybe more than that, maybe 20. And I asked them in their languages, how did they express awe? And it was amazing, whether it was German, Farsi, they said something like, wow. And the people from India, they said, wow, wow. It was still pretty close, right? So this is kind of amazing that the same kind of noise comes from our mouth. But what I think is amazing is that these also, and this probably already come to your mind, is that tears and chills and expressions like this, they are the same way that we express the Spirit. They're the same things that we feel and express the feeling of the Spirit. So for me, this suggests that feeling awe is like it is feeling the Spirit. And that in a sense, the Spirit, when we think about these sources, is testifying of the goodness of all of these things when we feel awe when we see them. And so I think that awe is this powerful link between spirituality, positive psychology, neuroscience, a good life, and that to increase our emotional well-being, all we need to do is just sort of feel a little bit more awe every day. So when I see Timpanogos, this is what I tell everybody, and then I try to do it a little bit, is just linger. When you feel awe, just linger for 3 extra seconds. 3 extra seconds. So when you look, if you see a cute puppy, well, it's sort of moral beauty, I guess. I don't know what it is, but we feel a little awe sometimes when we see puppies playing. Watch it for 3 extra seconds. Okay. Or when you notice somebody helping someone else, just don't turn away quite as quickly. Just let it sort of soak in. So we talk about take in the good. But take in the good an extra 3 seconds when you feel awe. And I think that will help. I think I have 1 minute left. So I do want to finish with just this theory that I work on in my research that has to do with building more happiness and well-being through shared experiences. So I'm an experience designer. The thing that I care the most about is, can we learn to design experiences that increase our connection with each other? Because we know already that human connection and positive emotion are tightly connected. There is no better source to happiness than our connections. All the research over and over coming in waves, it suggests that it's really our relationships in that model I showed you of PERMA. It's our relationships that have the most impact on our happiness. So what I'm trying to figure out is the experience types, the characteristics, the components of experiences that bring this to pass. And this is some of what we found. So I'm just going to finish with this. We found that novelty increases our positive emotion and increases our connection with people. So doing new things together. Challenging, we have evidence that the right amount of challenge, so not an overwhelming amount and not just a tiny bit, but challenging things that we might do that would actually still be hard for us. So we've talked a lot about doing hard things. There's good reason for that, because that can increase our positive emotion and actually decrease our negative emotion. When we're more open about who we are and we're willing to share our authentic selves, that's something that tends to lead to more connection. And I think there are some others that we're seeing benefits from, like reciprocity, which means kind of sharing our self-disclosure, being deeply engaged in experiences, and really having high quality experiences. Also, we have evidence that increases our connection. So I'm finished with my lecture. I could probably go on and on and on, but I'm trying to watch my time. But thank you for participating. Thank you for being willing to send the text. Thank you for being willing to shake someone's hand and smile at them. And I hope that you can say, well, these are easy things. Nobody's asking me for another half hour out of my life. I'm asking you for 20 seconds a day. That maybe these are things that can increase your social well-being and your emotional well-being. Thanks for coming.